like, yeah, throw a big stack of papers and I will work through that list, no problem. So that's a big part of what I did. And now I do the same thing, just only for our internal games as part of Xbox Game Studios.
Super exciting. Thanks for sharing. So to start off, we have a couple questions that we're going to just be kind of firing off. So would love for you to share what is ID at Xbox? And then for Victor, how did Double Fine Productions get introduced to the ID at Xbox team? So maybe Chloe, you can go first.
Yeah, so ID at Xbox was basically put together so that we are making it easier for independent devs to bring their creations to Xbox. The idea is to simplify the publishing process, the onboarding process, and not be tied into having to have that one contact in those big companies where it's often really hard to know who you need to speak to. And as much as we try and meet with a lot of people, we need to make it easy for everyone to just be able to register, sign an NDA, submit, game concepts, and go through certification, work with marketing teams, and all of that. So the idea is to simplify that and hopefully see great games come through to the platform.
Cool. That is such a vital role too, because yes, when it's your first time trying to publish, it can feel scary, but having someone who you can contact just to at least get a few, get your hand held a little bit through the process, even if you eventually take it over. It's very nice. So thank you for your service. How did we get introduced? Well, I think our first independently published, because we had published on the Xbox platforms, I think of every generation. So we were always on the platform, but when we were more about indie publishing and publishing our own stuff at Double Fine, I think our first game would have been Broken Age in 2017. Y'all might know that game. So we published that, and then since then, we were just publishing everything we released on the platform. So, and we worked with our manager, Karen Mitchell, I think was our contact at Xbox, and she was great. And yeah, it was kind of in a similar role. She just helped us, when I was kind of doing 20 things at once, and I just needed to know, how do I figure out this one thing? She would be great and respond. Although most of the time, it was more no, I should take the effort and actually go in the forums and try to find the answer versus constantly pinging our account manager. So, but that's how we started, is just kind of looking to Xbox and trying to get our stuff on the platform.
I'm just curious, show of hands, how many people have played Double Fine Productions games before? I'm just curious. Okay, we got a lot of people in the crowd. That's awesome. What are some of the most popular games from Double Fine?
You know the names, like Psychonauts. That one kind of kicked off the whole shebang. Broken Age was a big one because of the whole Kickstarter effort around that. Brew Legend is a big one. Psychonauts 2, recently we published our second sequel ever. So if you haven't played that yet, check it out. It's pretty good. Cool.
So as an indie, what do you need to have when it comes to having a successful game on the Xbox platform?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a big question. But I would say there's several things that you can do to make your game as visible and as successful as possible. First is use the tools that are there to be used and ask questions. We have various aliases that become available once you register on the program, and there's real people behind them. It's not always me or a counterpart account manager, but we have a team that works behind the scene and is there to answer anything from I can't get my account to work, or how do I download the GDK, or who do I speak in marketing, what price should I set for my game, all of that. And so the earlier you engage with us, the easier it is for us to help you. And then in terms of, what do you need to have a successful game? It's easy to say, but make a great game. But also really look at what's already on the platform. What does well on the platform, what does well on other platforms as well. Is there a niche? Is there a genre that works better than others? Is there something that you're really passionate about? Because that's really important, that you believe in the game that you're pushing forward. But yeah, engage early, ask questions, and email us. And sometimes we don't always answer super quick because we're a small team, but just chase us.
Yeah, but we have your contact info, right. So yeah.
You know where I live. So.
do you have anything to add to this on like maybe what made your games so successful on the Xbox platform?
I mean, I think our games are great. Like I work there because I know that, you know, whatever the game is, whoever the lead of the project is, it's going to have a distinct voice and be unique. And like, even if it's similar to other stuff out there, it is coming from, you know, a person or a team who just really believes in it and just puts everything they have into this creation. So I guess, yeah, like obviously there are things to balance, like, well, what sells? You know, maybe we should lean into that more or less. But ultimately, yeah, like having something that you really believe in, and like this is mine or this is ours, and this is what we want to bring to the platform. It helps to not just make it successful, but also to communicate it. Like I think that's a big part of starting early and getting in contact is like having, like in film, they have the concept of the log line, you know, like the brief sort of, you know, succinct explanation of what your game is, and having this passion and this sort of understanding of what your game is will help you to sell it and to get it onto platforms and just, you know, hopefully do well once you put it out there.
So what is the advantage to publishing on Xbox compared to competitors, would you say?
Well, let me start by actually saying there's so many paths to bringing your game to be visible, and there's Xbox, but you know, Steam is amazing for that, PlayStation is amazing for that, Nintendo is amazing for that. Like there are so many and more. I mean, we were just talking about itch.io as well earlier.
Yeah.
There's like so many platforms and ways to reach your audience. For Xbox specifically, you know, we've tried really hard, and we continue to work really hard in trying to give devs visibility and a voice. So in marketing activities that we'll do, where we'll promote your game, we'll try and do developer interviews, we'll try and engage with you know, your social channels and amplify them. It's important for us that we're not Xbox promoting a game, that we're pushing your game on our platform, right? Like you help us be successful as a platform by bringing great content, and so our job is to highlight that content and make the dev and the teams be the stars of that game and tell that story. So to me, that's key to my job and to making partners successful on the platform is, and that's probably what I would say is the advantage of publishing on Xbox. Yeah.
I love that. What would you say are some of the competitive differentiators for like Double Fine, for instance, releasing on Xbox?
Well, I guess I can say Xbox is a very unified platform in that they have global presence. The systems, the portals you have to work with as a developer and publisher are all very mature and well developed, and just they have a global presence. So, you know, it's one click, maybe not one click, maybe not that easy, but it is relatively straightforward to distribute your game to like 200 some countries, you know, around the world. So it's very good about like having that kind of global reach. And also like the GDK is the game development kit is really matured now. So it's very like, and it's very sort of straightforward to get started. And then once you have a build up and running, to kick out builds for console, for PC, etc. So it's just a very mature platform, I think. And that's been pretty useful for when you're, you know, trying to make a game, but you're at the end of it, you're like, oh wait, I have to publish this now and try to distribute it to my players. So that's been a big benefit for sure.
That's great. So what does the concept approval process look like when you're publishing to Xbox, let's say as like an indie?
Yeah, the first step is to register on our onboarding portal, and you sign up with ID at Xbox. It's a click-through NDA now, I believe so. And once you're past that stage, you then submit what we call a game information form, or GIF or GIF. We can debate that later. But essentially, it's a summary of what your game is about, and you submit any assets that you have at that time. If you don't have a build yet, that's fine. But if you've got, you know, concept art or GIF, the other kind, and any kind of information on gameplay loop, if you have a pitch document to share, anything like that goes through that form, and then our portfolio team reviews the content. If we need to ask questions, that happens at that stage, and that's how the title gets approved, and then you get issued what we call a title license agreement, which says essentially you're allowed to publish your game on Xbox. And after that, you run through the process, obviously, of doing your hard work of developing the game and then working through certification and all along, in parallel, as I was mentioning earlier, you try and engage as much as possible with marketing team and any other kind of component that will help with your launch.
What do you think the timeline is on that? Do you have anything to share?
That's really dependent on the game and what your production timeframe will be. Some games we start engaging literally just months before. It's not what I recommend. And some games, we're talking about the, for 2025 release timeframe. Yeah. So it's really, but your title might be smaller in scope. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to talk to us 4 years early. But I think once you're past the pre-production phase and you're around your kind of pre-alpha vertical slice phase, is a good time to engage.
Do you have anything to add from Double Fine side of like what that looked like on your guys' end for concept approval?
I recall it was very straightforward, and I think it's probably been streamlined since, because it's been a while since we had to do a sort of formal submission. I guess I would just echo what I wish I knew when we were starting out, which is yes, start as early as you can, because I think I was also afraid or concerned that like, we don't have enough to show, and they're going to be like, oh, come back to us later when you have more game or what have you. So yeah, I'd say just reach out as early as you can. Once like, yeah, we have this game we're working on, and we know this is going to be a thing that we put into the world. So once you're certain of that, like reach out and just kind of kick things off. And yeah, because of this process you have to go through anyway, you might as well kind of kick it off early. And then later on, you'll follow up with whatever other documentation and kind of assets are needed. But yeah, start early. Earlier the better, I'd say.
So what steps has Microsoft taken to make it easier for indies to publish on the platform?
I think the biggest one is we've tried to not make it dependent on speaking to one given point of contact, although it's always helpful, of course. But we have about, I think, over 4,000 registered partners, and so that's a lot of developers. It's great, but we can't talk to every single one of them individually. And so the biggest thing is that we've tried and automate a lot of the process. So you have access to a portal. Once you once you're registered with us, you also create a partner center account, and that's our kind of publishing development environment. And a lot of components of the publishing process are self-served in there. So you propagate your game metadata in there, you push builds through certification, you set your release time, and that the developer is completely in control of that. You don't have to refer to anyone.
Don't mean to interrupt, but is it similar to Steam? Because like when I publish on Steam, it's like almost like it's just like a web form, and you kind of go through and you just hit all the different checkboxes. Is it similar to that?
I'm not super familiar with that part of Steam, so I don't know how similar it is. I know Steam is right.
Yeah, like all the yes, all the platforms going to have the same base things they need. Maybe they're not all Steam is pretty instantaneous. They might not all be on that level, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. That's good. That's good to hear. So what marketing tips do you have for the indies out there to get visibility on the Xbox platform?
Actually, I have one more thought on the previous question. What's great about Xbox specifically is their documentation is just online. Like, it's weird for a first-party studio to say this, but I just Google, like, I need this thing for Xbox. It's just there. Like, so much of the documentation is just available. So that's another way that they make it really easy for people to just find the info they need.
That's totally true, because I remember when I was developing for Nintendo, it was all like in a closed portal, and you weren't able to talk about anything like out of like the NDA portal. So that was really tough when I ran into development challenges. So I guess I'm going to repeat it once again. What marketing tips do you have? Because I think all the indies out here, right, we might not have a huge marketing budget to get our game visibility. And if we're going to spend all this time putting our game on the platform, we want to make sure that we can, monetize and make money. So what avenues are there to get extra visibility or potentially promotion on the Xbox platform?
So again, let's engage early with our teams and see what opportunities there are to highlight your content. So we have various time during the year where we'll do shows. There's obviously the big Microsoft Bethesda showcase that we did last June, and there's opportunities around things like Gamescom and GDC. The Game Awards will always have big beats at those events, but we also run our more kind of ID focused events. So we work closely with Twitch, for example, and we have a Twitch gaming showcase. The last one was mid-September, and I think that was our third, maybe fourth one. Some people think it's too long. I think it's great because we get to speak to our devs and hear from them about their game, which we really like to do. And Twitch has been really great at providing various streamers to present, and that's been really cool. And then we also work with our social channels, so obviously ID at Xbox on Twitter and YouTube, but the other areas that you're fully in control of as devs and self-publishing devs are things like box art, for example, which if it's your first time publishing on console, you really have to kind of rewire that to think, okay, this is not on PC. My audience is sitting 6 feet away from the TV, and how do I stand out on the Xbox store on the TV in the living room, which is different. And so you want to think about your box art nice and early. You want to think about your launch plan. Are you going to announce and have a really long runway to release? And in which case, how do you keep people kind of interested in wanting more? And then things like using pre-orders is something that I definitely recommend. You do have to go through certification before you can set up your pre-order, but again, have a nice long work back schedule planning to help you reach those kind of key milestones without rushing through. You'll get visibility at the pre-order point, you'll get visibility once you actually launch. All of those kind of bring your game back up to the surface on the dashboard, because I know it's hard to get visibility there all the time. There's a lot of competition and games that get released all the time. And also think about your release time frame. Don't release in October.
Oh, that's a good tip. Okay. So don't release in October.
There's, a certain Call of Duty game that comes out a lot of press time, a lot of advertising spots, and are just going to take over, the gaming world for days or weeks. And so it's really, as much as you can, try and look at the release calendar and public information out there. Ask us, when is a good time to release?
Yeah.
And often it's not in the fall.
But in my experience with my games that I release, I had the most sales on Christmas Day. It's like 10x. So if you can get your game out like right before Christmas, I've noticed like it does really well. I don't know if you have anything to add from marketing tips or anything like that from your end.
I'm not in marketing. I have a ton of respect for marketing because they sell our games. It's so huge. But I know, what do I know? One, people love constant media drops. So I'd say if you get into the habit of like recording clips of your game and just file it all away, keep it all somewhere, because once you're nearing release, like I'm sure having regular drops of something cool to show kind of builds up that interest and gets people going in there. I think that's probably what I've observed the most is just like people love to see your game.
Yeah.
Or see something cool or interesting about it, and that'll generate, they'll share it and it'll sort of go from there.
Cool. Great tips.
I'll name one team because I think they're really worth following on Twitter because they do it really, really well, and their game is still somewhere out. But you should go and follow AgroCrab, team who's developing another Crab's Treasure, and they're awesome on social, and they're an indie team. They're based in Seattle, and I think they're a really good example of what you should do to get your game to be your community to engage. So
cool. What Unity and Unreal plugins are available to make the development / porting process easier to the Xbox platform?
So I'm not a developer, but in terms of what the GDK supports, obviously we work closely with Unity and Unreal, and so they work really well with that. If you want more info specifically on the plugins, again, publicly available information, the GDK, you can look it up, or you can engage with our teams as well. Once you're registered, you can engage with our developer support team, and what the GDK does well is that you only obviously need one tool to develop across Xbox One and Series X and Windows. So in terms of porting process, that for those 3 platforms, that makes it a non-issue. Luckily, we've moved on from UWP. I don't know if any of you have experienced UWP, but it's not that anymore. So
yes, I did.
Cool. If I'm an indie with a small following, how can I build a community on the Xbox platform? I know when I was doing game development on like the Nintendo Wii U, they had like a Miiverse where you could go and like interact with various communities. I was curious if there's a similar sort of community on the Xbox platform, and maybe how indies out there can leverage that to get extra marketing visibility for their game.
So I, as far as I know, we don't have anything similar to what Nintendo was doing, but we do kind of try and amplify messages rather than have a kind of a place other than obviously the Idea at Xbox channels already in existence. We do have a Discord channel which has got a lot of activity, and a lot of developers will connect there. So I definitely recommend you guys check it out. We share news on there about what kind of events we're going to and activities we're doing. We also try and engage at more local levels like this. I had a colleague who was doing an event in Atlanta just last week as well, and we run some in Europe and various locales as well. And so at those events, we encourage obviously other indies to network as well and connect. But otherwise, it's done more at a kind of platform level. Yeah.
Totally. Okay. So yeah, these are some questions from our community. So a lot of indie devs now build their games with Steam in mind first, because the publishing process is so much more straightforward, and they'll only consider consoles later in the development process, depending upon budget, time, and connections, right? So how is the Xbox team working to remove the common barriers to entry for indie devs hoping to publish to the console? So I feel like we touched on some of these things.
Yeah, so some of it, I think, I mean, Steam is such a big platform, right? And there is so much content going on it, and they've definitely done that really well, the kind of automation and making tools, stand on their own and interact directly through the portals. We're constantly improving our processes. There's definitely things that we don't do as flexibly as Steam. You do need to talk to us a little bit earlier to plan things like sales promotions or discount events, and that's something that we try and educate our partners on. We'll run digital day events to kind of talk through price planning way ahead, and things like not doing launch discount, for example, because we have literally zero data to show that you're selling more units and we think you're leaving money on the table. But things like having maybe a special item at launch might work better than discounting. And so it's not an overnight process. I know obviously Steam is pretty automated, and so you click through and it happens, but we're trying to automate more and also communicate, best practices.
No, I love that. We got a couple questions left, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A.
I'll add one more thing to that,
Yeah.
which is having been at the end of the process where we have to go through like the XRs, the Xbox requirements and such. I will say it's become so much more streamlined. Like there are just less requirements that might feel arbitrary, because that's kind of what they feel like sometimes. You're like, why do I need to set up networking code a certain way? That's annoying. But a lot of that stuff has really been streamlined and reduced and simplified over time. So that's gotten way better. So versus Steam has no such requirements. They're very simple. So that is still in place for consoles, all the console platforms, but it's gotten a lot easier to go through that for sure.
And that's also a competitive advantage, right? Because if you can get your game on a console, then you get more visibility because it's a little bit harder to some degree, but it's still easy compared to what it used to be.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've been in games for 20 years, and when you used to have to ship things by mail to get a platform's approval, we're obviously not there anymore, thank goodness. But yeah, it's gotten a lot easier across the board, so yeah.
And I think this is a question for you. So there's something to be said for the originality and scrappiness of smaller game studios. How does Double Fine plan to keep their culture and vision intact post Microsoft acquisition?
I think Tim and Phil shook on it when Tim decided to join Xbox. That he was like, "You're not going to change things, right?" And that was part of the agreement. And Phil Spencer's talked about this, how their approach to studios now is to bring on studios as limited integration studios, where Xbox wants us and every studio they sort of acquire and that joins to keep making the kinds of games that they are good at. They don't want to change the culture or approach to our games. They're just there to support us and help us to have the resources to make the games without those kinds of barriers that we used to butt up against. So in terms of keeping the culture and vision intact, like what changed? I don't think much changed. Tim's still head of the studio. Like he started the company, and all the leads are still the same, and all the folks are still the same. So thankfully, yeah, that was just part of the deal going in, I guess, to keep things as they are. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are there any games you've seen recently that didn't perform as well as expected on the Xbox platform, or vice versa? And any that had low expectations at first and then became way more popular than expected? So what do you think happened, and what was the special sauce that made this happen?
So, I mean, obviously I can't comment on sales figures or, and honestly, we don't necessarily know what the expectations might be from the dev on what their sales are going to be. But the special sauce, I mean, that's a dark art, right? What makes your game fun and what makes your game fun to you might not be the same thing as what makes your game fun to gamers. So if you get a chance to do some user testing and gather feedback, in the early stages, that helps. But there's definitely recently, and I'm going to name that title because also they've been public about their success, and so I feel good about sharing that. But Slime Rancher 2 released just last week. It's a Game Pass Day 1 title. The team is awesome. Monument Park, they're super nice, and their game is just lovely. And they've also, shared that it's been very successful on Steam, which is such good news. And I think the reason why their game is so successful is it's the second iteration on Slime Rancher, the original, that was a great game. But they've also really taken their time to listen to feedback from their community and put that feedback into Slime Rancher 2. And they've engaged early, not just with us, but with their audience. So I think this, as much as it's really hard to predict what the next big hit is going to be, having that openness of, okay, well, I thought that this game loop mechanic would be really fun, but the feedback I'm getting is that actually it's too repetitive. What do I do to make it more fun? What do I do to keep people coming back to that game? And don't take criticism too hard at that point, because actually you might come up with something really awesome out of it. But it's hard. Making games is hard. And I don't make games, but I have a lot of respect for anyone who does. So yeah, sorry.
Oh, great. So this is the last question. Psychonauts has a dedicated fan base and expectations were high for the sequel. How did Double Fine balance the need to please their existing fans while also taking risks and innovating on the original concept?
Well, I think with this one, Psychonauts it's a known quantity. So I would say that for the sequel, the team had a target, which is this but better, this but newer, this but more modern. So I think that really was the focus. Like, I think for Tim and everyone on the team, their focus was just, take what was great about the first game and sand off those rough edges, I guess. Not as tough in certain meat circusy places. Just streamline it so it's more modern, and just make sure that we have at least as much content and gameplay as the original game. So match it and then streamline it and make it better and nicer looking and sound better and everything. So yeah, I think in the case of a sequel like this, the team just knew that they had their baseline. Like this was good and this is where we're starting. Now let's just see if we can do it again and better. And certainly, we took the time to make sure that it was good. So that's also a part of it. We were lucky to get that extra time and make sure it was solid.
Well, that's awesome. So that wraps up the can questions. We're then going to open it up to a live Q&A. But first, I just want to thank everyone for being here once again. This wouldn't have been possible without all you guys showing up. We're actually hosting another event November 1st for Unite at the Unity offices. So if you guys are on the SF Game Development Meetup group, I'm going to be posting that event in a couple of days, but everyone should show up. We're going to be talking with the Unity CEO, so it'll be a really great opportunity to meet the Unity staff. So I'll be posting that later. But with that, it was great talking with you guys. I learned a lot, so thank you. Super fun. We're now going to open it up to just a live Q&A for these two wonderful guests. So if you want to just raise your hand, I'll walk around and hand you the mic. And then we also have some people on the live stream as well. Did anyone ask questions? Okay, great. We got a lot of questions. So we'll do Q&A, I guess, for another 20 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up, okay?
Sure.
Cool. I'm going to start here.
Yeah, this might be a little hopeful, but about what percentage of applications get through to being approved from the concept stage at ID and Xbox?
Oh, that's a good question. I honestly have no idea in terms of percentages, but I would say the majority gets approved. Maybe someone will slap me on the head.
I guess if it's a majority, what's the types of games that don't get approved? Like,
often
what does it take to not get through then?
Well, more often than not, when the game is not approved, it'll be because we don't have enough information on it. It'll be because we might have a description but no game assets at all. And there's reasons why concepts might be submitted this early on, but most of the time I would say it's because we just don't have enough information. Yeah. I have no idea what the percentage might be because that's kind of done by another team, but I've not come across it a lot myself. And when I have, it's been because, hey, we're not clear on this, or do you have more information on that element? And we usually reach out and then we get that information and can move on.
So it's not the type of game as much as just, so any kind of game can be submitted. It's just how much information and how much you know about it is what affects the approval process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going to do one online. We're going to go back and forth here.
All right. And we actually are starting to get more questions online. So the first one that we have, and Jordan, you might also be able to answer this. And it is, would it be possible to balance being a cybersecurity professional and a game dev on the side? So essentially balancing one career while also doing game dev on the side. Is it possible? And then I'm just going to throw in there, what are some potential tips to help strike that balance as well?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I mean, I can answer that. I mean, I think a lot of us in this room as indies, right, we wear multiple hats. I mean, I run this game development group. I also work a full-time job. I also did game development full-time in college. So I think it's totally possible. I just think you have to have good time management skills, and you have to be willing to put a lot of time into something. Like they say, to master something, you have to put 10,000 hours into it. I mean, I definitely remember sitting in a coffee shop every Sunday with my mentor, Angelo, who runs the indie game developer group in the South Bay, and we would literally code games together every single Sunday religiously. And then I would go home and I would work on my games for 6 to 8 hours a day on top of having to do school in order to release my games. So I dedicated so much time, and probably 7 to 8 years doing that every single day. So when you get frustrated with something, you just can't give up, and you have to just keep trying, and you have to come to meetups like this to meet the people who can make you successful, because without connections, it's only yourself. So that's my best advice: is you got to keep putting in the work, and you can do it. I think that pretty much sums it up, right? We'll pass the mic here.
Hi, my name is Ebele. It's spelled Ebele. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm currently doing masters in business analytics. But before coming here, I was a filmmaker. I wrote and produced TV and film, and I thought of it would be nice to come to do gaming here. So I was wondering how to transition from that to here, since I'm already doing business analytics. And I was wondering if you had tips, ideas, pathway. I don't know. I'm just
so there's a ton of roles, that have kind of cross functions and cross industry skills. I would say, all our jobs are posted Microsoft.com/jobs, I think, but Microsoft.com, and you'll find the jobs site. There's I don't know what there is right now, but we have roles in as business analysts. A lot of our Game Pass team, for example, is very analytics based, and so I think there's a ton of skills that you could bring, from the industry you're in to transition into gaming. My best advice: you see someone on LinkedIn that you think is in the role that you're interested in, reach out to them. Perfect.
There you go.
Just and anyone who needs to hear it, like, don't be shy about reaching out to people. If this is an industry you're interested in, the worst that's going to happen is the person is not going to answer. Who cares, but you're very most likely, will get some feedback, and you'll be able to set up a time and have a chat. And even if it's 10 minutes, it could be 10 minutes that change your life. So,
Yeah, that's good advice.
I'd say also not apply to everything, but don't be like, even if something is tangentially related and you're like, kind of what I do, kind of not, just apply.
Yeah.
Like if it's something you think you can, do good at it, and you're like, yeah, I can do that, just apply for it anyway. I think early on I was always hesitating, and I just realized, like, no, just apply. Like you said, like the worst is you just don't get a reply back, or they don't respond. So just whatever you see that you're interested in, just go for it.
I'll add one thing to that. I'm getting more engaged with the Women in Games community, and one of the things that I was definitely guilty about was that I would look at a job application and do exactly that. I'd be like, yes, oh, but I don't have that. Oh, I won't apply. And no offense to gentlemen in the room, it's something that women do a lot. Just go for it. Look at the things that you have and not at the things that you don't have, because no one has got all the stuff listed on a job description. And so, yeah, just be confident.
Yeah, and you're in the right place. So, yeah. Another question from online.
Yes, question. And also the individual that asked a question with regards to balance said, thank you so much. That is very inspirational. So that's for you, Jordan.
Cool.
As for our next question, the question is, what does Xbox have in store for Web3 games?
Wow, I wish I had the answer. I'm really not the right person to answer that. Phil Spencer has kind of touched upon the metaverse in some interviews that he's been doing over the last few months, but I don't know is my answer. Personally, I read about it and I keep abreast about it, but I don't know as a company what the plans are.
Do we have anyone from this side of the room? I see your hand over there. I'm going to get to you. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much, Chloe and Victor, for this super helpful talk, and for Jordan for coordinating it. For one question phrased slightly differently for both of you. For Chloe, what is, in your ideal world, what do you wish new partners would come to you knowing about or being prepared about? Or conversely, for Victor, what do you wish you knew about stepping into a relationship with Xbox?
Yeah, I'll let you start.
Oh, okay. I think there's a lot of information that's publicly available, and maybe we're not always promoting it or making that clear, but just like you would do when you prepare for a job interview or anything like that, when you reach out to us and you want to pitch your game, whether it be for marketing support or you want your game to be on Game Pass or anything like that, prepare yourself and put a pitch together. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy, but really ask yourself, what is it that they're going to need to know about to help them kind of champion my game internally. And often I'll see pitch coming through and there's no information on what the budget ask might be, and it doesn't mean that we'll necessarily are able to fund the game, but it's good to know what the budget is overall, because it helps us understanding the scope of the game or the goal of the scope of the game. And so just really be focused on delivering good information to us. We'll come back and ask questions. I mean, no matter how complete the pitch is, guarantee we'll have questions, and that's good. But if we can skip past the kind of basics, the genre, your competitive kind of benchmark, who you're targeting, your price point, your release schedule, your production schedule, budget, if you're funded, not funded, and background about your team. Tell us about your team. Like, we really want to know who is behind the game. So that's what I would say. Just do some prep, and then when you get a chance to speak to us, then we have it all ready, and we can share it internally and make that easier.
Yeah, team background's a good point, because I was thinking, like, not just summarizing the game, but what is it about the game that team or you or the developer are excited about? Because whatever it is you're excited about in that game, or whatever the core part of that game is, that always comes through. Like when we talk about what we love about whatever it is we're working on, it comes through. So if you can share that in these sort of documents and then in that early conversations, I think it also comes through. But in terms of what I wish I knew that there are places where I can just search for the answers. Like I mentioned earlier, that there are forums. Like every platform, Xbox and everyone has a forum where, just like this, many devs just gather to ask these questions. And as you're developing, you get into those sort of technical and more specific questions about, I have this specific problem. And early on, I think early on as a producer, when I was taking on this sort of role and helping to release our games, I just wish I knew that there was these places where I could search for my answers. I'm not sure why at the time that didn't come through as I was learning about the platforms, but it just didn't. So for a while I was emailing different aliases, hoping somebody would get back to me. But like you're saying, sometimes it takes a little bit of time, and sometimes I need the answer immediately or soon. So yeah, I just realized eventually, like, oh, there are all these forums and other developers who are running into the same things. And if I just had that one link to that forum, I would have saved me some time. So, yeah.
All right, our next question. Non-disclosure agreements make collaboration between indies without formal agreements, e.g. open source, difficult. This makes consoles more difficult than non-NDA platforms for indies. How can this be improved?
Well, I mean, there's tons of reasons why we have NDAs. One of them is that once we have an NDA in place, we can talk about a number of things that are specific to the platform that we might not want the competition to know about, whether it's technical information or, in the years where we have a new platform, a new generation of console coming out, there's a lot of super sensitive information. So, that just can't go in the public domain, but we want the devs to know about it. So NDAs, can be a little bit overwhelming when you're not used to them, and it's a lot of words, and it's something that you sign and you have to commit to. But, it's a two-way street. We also don't talk about your project. I mean, it's just necessary evil, really.
I saw a question over here. I'm going to go and hand the mic.
What about like developing actual applications versus games? Like, is there any avenue or route towards that? And if so, what does that look like in a perfect
on
world,
Xbox specifically?
Yeah.
That's a great question. So I don't know that we have non-gaming apps specifically, although I say that we have media apps, so you can have there's the Spotify app and you know, other media app that you can install on your Xbox. It's not my sector. I'm only focused on games, but there are definitely companies that develop apps that will go on, you know, consoles. So I don't know who you need to speak to, but reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to try and help you figure out who you need to speak to for that. And the other path is the Windows Store, which, you know, is obviously PC based, and so there's a ton of that there that are not gaming specific.
All right, we got one over here. I'll get to you.
So, going back to Game Pass a bit, is that submission process kind of similar to the ID at Xbox One in that there's a different portal, or is that done through just like talking? Is it better to go that route, talking to an individual? Like, what does that process look like if you're qualified to answer?
Yeah, so everything starts with registering on ID at Xbox and with submitting your concept to us. We don't have a submission form for Game Pass consideration. You know, that's the first people that are going to see your game submission are our portfolio team. They're the ones who see literally every single game that comes through. And they'll be the first point where they might say, hey, you know, this game looks really interesting. We should keep an eye on it. The other area, you know, the other avenue to be considered for Game Pass is you email us, whether it's through the aliases available or you have a direct contact. And it doesn't have to be in the ID team specifically. We've had, you know, other colleagues from other teams that have reached out to us and say, hey, you know, someone contacted me about this game. And, you know, we try and look at as many games as possible. Obviously, Game Pass, you know, is a curated program. We don't want all games to go in Game Pass because it loses its value otherwise to users, but also to the developers. And so, you know, we probably say no to a lot of games, a lot more than we say yes. But in terms of how you would go about getting your game considered, there's no additional work needed other than, you know, maybe just pointing out that you're particularly interested in discussing Game Pass opportunities.
Okay, I had two that came in immediately. One is a follow-up to the NDA question, but just before that, the first question is, what programming tools are typically used to learn game development programming besides Unity, Learn, and YouTube?
I would say like what, Unreal is one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing that now, where I am, you know, 20 years in, I'm like, I'm going to learn some programming. So what I've done is I just go to community colleges, like local. Like a lot of schools now offer some kind of game design or programming programs. And I went to that because it's a pretty affordable option. And if someone, because obviously, yes, YouTube's always there. There are many online resources as well. But if you feel like you need that extra level of like a professor or someone to whom you can directly ask questions and interact with, I found it a pretty good option as well. So that's pretty good. So far, I'm liking it. So that's one option.
And then a follow-up to the question with regards to NDAs. Our attendee says, to clarify, how can multiple companies or developers under NDA develop an open source game engine for Xbox or port a language such as Rust? And when they say open source, it also means but restricted to developers that are under NDA.
Oh, I see. Well, I think in that case, the best path is to really reach out to our developer support team because, you know, the GDK is fully compatible with Unity, with Unreal, but there's obviously new tools all the time and middleware and you know, other aspects that we're not, you know, we can't always keep up with all the time. And so I think if there's any kind of open source tools that are being used and, you know, if they don't work with the GDK now, our team might have some suggestions. And so I would just invite reaching out and having that discussion.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question. We're wrapping up. I think I saw one.
I see two hands. If we want.
Yeah, there. Yeah. Well, I saw over here. So.
Hi there. So thanks for the great talk. This is Anna Mary. I'm a UX researcher. And I was kind of curious, have y'all had any challenges to where you had to keep the interaction of the game consistent, uniform with the Xbox platform, make sure the players can kind of understand how to interact with your game, but also like keep the creativity and novelty of the game? Weird stuff that, we're a creative community here. So like, oh, the left button does something unexpected, or like in the middle of the game, the control scheme gets purposefully thrown off. Like, have you ever had to have that balance those out, or at that challenge of like making a uniform experience, but also just letting unusual and creative things happen, and trying to keep Xbox platform?
I'm trying to think. Because, we just shipped Psychonauts 2, and that's a really wacky game. A lot of stuff happens, different control schemes, different sort of scenarios. I was just chatting with the programmer who worked on sort of controls and cameras and such, and I didn't work on it personally, so I can't speak to too many specifics, but the point of his, what he was telling me was a lot of iteration. Like a lot of, maybe you know this well, you just have to iterate on an idea, and you kind of hone in on you shave off what's not working with it, and you hone it down. So I think iteration is just a big part of that, is just making sure that that not just you try it out as well, like other people, other players, whether it's family, friends, other people who you can, share it with to try the experience, and they can maybe communicate to the developer like, hey, this was a little rough, or this is great, or all the opposite. This was amazing, and you handled this well. So yeah, iteration and just getting it in front of people and players so they can check it out.
Well, this has been awesome. This has been so much fun today. Thank you both for coming out. Yeah, I think we saw some other questions, but feel free to come up afterward, and you guys are going to be around until 9 to answer them. But yeah, thanks everyone for attending, and hope you had fun.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Cool.
Oh, it's on. Okay. I've never used a mic before, right? So we're going to continue doing the HoloLens demos in the different rooms. So feel free to check that out if you're interested.
Hey,
and
thanks. Great to
other than that, thank you all for coming out to this event.